In 1910, a man sat in grief. He had lost his wife. He had lost his daughter. He had lost his father. And in that grief, he wrote the most luminous words Indian literature has ever produced. His name was Rabindranath Tagore. The collection was called Gitanjali, Song Offerings. And it began not with sorrow. It began with wonder.
The divine has made me endless. Not powerful, not wise, not worthy, endless. The clay pot is small, yes. But what is poured into it is infinite. This is how Tagore begins his offering to God. Not with grandeur, with a broken pot held up to the sky.
Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. This frail vessel thou emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with fresh life. This little flute of a reed thou hast carried over hills and dales, and hast breathed through it melodies eternally new. At the immortal touch of thy hands, my little heart loses its limits in joy, and gives birth to utterance ineffable. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest, and still there is room to fill. Thou hast made me endless, such is thy pleasure. Not my merit, not my effort. His pleasure alone is the reason for my existence. I am endless, because he chose to make me so. This frail vessel thou emptiest again and again, and fillest it ever with fresh life. The pot breaks. The body fails. The heart empties. And still life is poured back in. Tagore does not ask why we suffer emptiness. He only marvels that we are filled again. This little flute of a reed thou hast carried over hills and dales, and hast breathed through it melodies eternally new. The poet has no music of his own. He is a hollow reed, but carried in the hands of the divine, breathed through by something greater. Out of that hollowness comes a song the world has never heard before, and will never hear the same way twice. At the immortal touch of thy hands my little heart loses its limits in joy and gives birth to utterance ineffable. There are moments in prayer, in music, in silence, when the boundary between the self and the infinite dissolves. Tagore says, when he touches me, my smallness simply vanishes. What is left is something that cannot be spoken, only felt, only offered. Thy infinite gifts come to me only on these very small hands of mine. Ages pass, and still thou pourest, and still there is room to fill. This is the most extraordinary paradox in all of devotional poetry. The gifts are infinite. The hands are small. And yet, the giving never stops. The receiving never ends. Ages pass. Civilizations rise and fall. And still, the divine pours. And still, there is room. This is not theology. This is love.
This is not a poem of petition. It is a poem of astonishment. Tagore opens the entire Gitanjali with an act of radical humility. He does not begin by praising God's greatness. He begins by marveling at his own smallness, and what the divine has chosen to do with it. Three images carry the entire poem. The vessel, the human body and soul as a clay pot, frail, breakable, emptied by grief, illness, loss, yet endlessly refilled by the divine. This is not suffering, it is renewal. Every emptying is preparation for new life. The flute, the poet as an instrument with no voice of its own. Alone, a reed flute is silent. Only when the divine breathes through it does music arise. Tagore says, I am not the source of my own song. I am only the hollow through which something greater moves. The small hands, perhaps the most tender image in all of Gitanjali. God's infinite gifts arrive, but they can only be received in the poet's very small, very human hands. The limitless must pass through the limited. This is the great mystery of incarnation. Connection to living tradition. This poem breathes the same air as the Bhakti saints. Kabir's metaphor of the broken pot, Mirabai's surrender to Krishna, the Upanishadic teaching that Brahman pours itself endlessly into Atman. Tagore distills centuries of Indian devotional thought into 11 lines of English prose poetry.